Bitcoin finally hits $100,000 tonight on December 4th after weeks of teasing the markets and investors around the $94,000 to $99,000 mark. The price move today came hours after President-elect Donald Trump nominated Paul Atkins as the new chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) to replace the outgoing SEC chair Gary Gensler. Atkins has served as a commissioner of the SEC before from 2002 to 2008. He later founded Patomac Global Partners, a consulting firm providing strategic advice on regulatory compliance, risk management, and corporate governance. So let's take a look at my screen here, and we'll take a look at the price action. Just today, a spike from $98,000. Let me just take a look at the 5-day view. Yeah, there we go. $98,000 to $102,000 and 740 is the latest reading on my screen. This is hours after the news of Paul Atkins' nomination has been announced. Year to date, Bitcoin is up somewhere around 130%. If you take a look at the last 5 years, let's take a look at how well it's done over the last bull cycle. So if we take the lows around December 2022 to now, it's up roughly 500%. Comparing that to the bull cycle of 2021, if we take the trough around 2019 to the peak at $69,000 in 2021, that's roughly a 1,700% move over the 2.5-year bull cycle. Let's take a look at what happened in the previous bull cycle leading up to 2017. Remember, in that bull cycle, Bitcoin peaked at around $19,000, almost $20,000, not quite, in December 2017. If we were to just take the same time period, so let's do 2016, mid-2016 to 2017, that would be a 3,000% move over that bull cycle. So every subsequent bull cycle in the last couple of years has seen less volatility on the upside and on the downside. So the question now remains, what are you going to do now that Bitcoin has officially hit $100,000? Are you selling? Are you buying more? Are you hodling? I like you to think about this answer before we continue with the segment, because I'm going to now play for you and show you a few key highlights from recent interviews I've done on Bitcoin with experts on what they would do and what they think is going to happen next to the price. Towards the end of the video, comment on whether or not you've changed your mind after listening to their rationale, and stay to the end for everyone's takes. We're going to go through a list of experts that have been on the show in the last 2 weeks. If you're new to the show, please do subscribe and hit the bell notification to get daily market updates. Let's start with Clem Chambers, CEO of A New FN.
Well, I like things when they're cheap and juicy and, ready to go to rock. And when it was down in, 20,000, that was very appealing to me. And now it's up at 100,000, which is where I thought it was going to go and where we'll be speaking about this for some time. And I actually think it will probably go to 115, maybe 120. Yeah. And if, when the lid comes off, it might go to 150. It might be up there for like 7 minutes before it backs down to 130 or whatever. Mm-hmm. This is the part of it's no longer cheap. And this is the part of it's near the top now. So we are at the top. And I always tend to sell early because, if you buy near the bottom and you sell near the top, you will do it very, very well. And that's my strategy. We're now near the top. This is no longer an appealing price for someone to get in at, because it's going to, at some point in, 6 months, a year, it's going to be down to 60,000 again. And I don't want to be sat in front of my screen watching for a 10,000 Bitcoin dollar move. I don't care. I'm in the 20s. And I'm out in the 90s. I mean, I literally got out on Sunday. I think it was 97 or 98. And I've still got my ETH because I think that will potentially run on. And it's much more not expensive as, say, a Bitcoin is. So I think that's potentially got legs. But now, you sit on a thumping great profit. Why would you sweat the last few percent? And, that's my attitude. Now, leave some on the table for somebody else. If everybody wants to sell, I want to buy. If everybody wants to buy, I want to sell. And this is that moment when everyone's going, oh, it's going to a million, billion, trillion. Oh, it's great. It's great. It's going to a billion. And that's when you want to say, yeah, have some of mine. Yeah. You really do need some of my Bitcoin now. Yes, that's right. Take my Bitcoin. Give me that fiat. Who needs that?
Chris Vermeulen, chief market strategist at the Technical Traders, has his outlook for the next key technical levels that Bitcoin is likely to test after hitting $100,000. Take a listen.
Yeah, and I guess depending where you look, like the futures chart actually just pierced $100,000 a couple of days ago. But this comes back to that psychological level you said, David, that whole number, 100,000. People have been talking about this for years. As we got closer over the past 2 weeks, people keep talking about 100K. Will it hit 100K? And so that plants more and more seeds in people's mind to be like, hey, if it hits 100K, I should probably sell some or sell all of it. And that's exactly what happened. It came up a few days ago, hit 100K, and then a bunch of sellers came in and started unloading, locking in profits as it starts to fall a little bit.
Did you notice a spike in volume around that 100K mark?
Yeah, it'd be actually interesting to see what the intraday chart did on that. If it was a huge bout of, where is that 100K? Let's just take a quick look. Yeah, here we go. So here's that 100K mark. So yeah, it ran up to 100K and then it got clobbered with a huge sell order. So somebody has had an order as soon as it crosses 100K, just execute, hit the bid, fire off shares or whatever you want to call it, Bitcoins, and sell. And then a bunch of others started to get into it and people got scared and more profit taking took place. So definitely a perfect trigger in terms of expect selling to step in. And right now, when we look at the daily chart, I was telling subscribers this before it happened. I said, listen, guys, we're going to go up to 100K. If it hits 100K, we're going to see some selling. There's going to be a bit of a pullback, but it doesn't mean it's topping. It's just a little short-term mental resistance level that people are trimming profits. Some people will try to short it. But the key thing, like I got long Bitcoin a couple of weeks ago, and first time I bought Bitcoin in like a decade. And the reason I did that is because when you look at this monthly chart, it doesn't really get any better. We've got this massive cup and handle pattern, which is one of the most bullish chart patterns you can get. If you want to get rid of the silly kind of cup and handle name to it, you could just say, well, there's a huge bull flag pattern. That is the halfway point. And using Fibonacci extension, which I find is the best technical tool to gauge support and resistance areas, if we take it from the low up to this high, and then down to this low and carry it forward, this tells us where Bitcoin should go to next, which is about $108,000, $109,000. So we hit our first target at this yellow line. We sold half of our position, and now we're just waiting for it to go up and blast through this 100K mark and hit our next target up between 109, 113,000 is our upside target. So I like Bitcoin. Not as an investment. I am not a Bitcoin person. I bought an ETF that trades Bitcoin. I don't actually trade the crypto itself. But the reason I like this is because it's such a herd mentality trade. And you get to a point where like everybody piles in and they do it. There's just such a herd mentality that when it starts, I'm like, let's just get in. This is just a short-term trade. Hopefully it only lasts a few weeks and we'll get in. And when the whole world piles in, it creates this big green spike. We'll hit our targets and we'll just cash out and then let everybody else deal with it. So I like Bitcoin. I still think it's going higher. And I think in a couple of days, we could be at that $109,000 mark. And it could go a whole lot higher from there. But that's where this chart pattern over the past several years are pointing to. And I remember being on a Bitcoin channel back when it was at 39,000, somewhere in here. And they were talking about I got laughed off the show by their whole group of people interviewing me. And I said, this is a very bearish chart pattern. Bitcoin is pointing to 16,000. And I got laughed off the show. They laughed and talked about me for like an hour after that. But we ended up going down to 16. Bitcoin when it has one of these types of moves, it actually had this type of move back in here, a bear flag pattern. This is the halfway point. And the second half of that move was 16K, which we hit. So this is like the flip side. This is the upside target. Very rarely do I get these really clear signals. And this time I'm just like, all right, we're taking this one because it should be almost like a gimme.
Well, what about the rest of the crypto market? What happens to altcoins? Benjamin Cowen, founder of Into the Cryptoverse, was on the show 2 weeks ago and gave us his outlook on Bitcoin dominance, which is a measure of Bitcoin's market cap as a percentage of total crypto market cap.
Personally, I don't think it's going to go all the way up to where it was previously at 73%. One of the reasons for that is because the stablecoin market cap is a lot higher today than it was back in 2020. And I think you could also sort of view the stablecoin market as a relative flight to safety, just as people might treat Bitcoin as a flight to safety within the own crypto asset class. 60% was my target because it was essentially just retracing where the bubble began with alt Bitcoin pairs. So altcoins really started to surge against Bitcoin in the post-halving year of 2021. And I was just thinking, hey, at the very least, we'll see Bitcoin dominance come back up to that level that it was at in 2021. The one thing to remember about Bitcoin dominance is that it tends to spend 3 years going up and then 1 year going down. So we've seen that now for a couple of cycles. You have your 2017 big drop by Bitcoin dominance. You also have the big drop in 2021. And then you can see that there's sort of 3 years in between where Bitcoin dominance goes up. And I think what ends up happening is people keep sort of making these premature calls for alt season, where Bitcoin dominance goes down. But when you look at Bitcoin, the Bitcoin dominance chart, you can actually pretty clearly see, where alt season is and where Bitcoin season is, right? So alt season is essentially these areas right here where Bitcoin dominance is aggressively dropping, and that's alt season. Bitcoin season is where Bitcoin dominance is just generally trending higher. And that's something we've essentially been in now for the last 3 years. My expectation from here, 60% was always my target. So I don't really feel like it has to go higher. But one of the reasons it very well could go higher is we still do actually have alt Bitcoin pairs historically off their historic lows. So if you look at total 3 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin, normally they retrace back to around, let's call it 25% of Bitcoin's market cap down here. And, right now they're at 0.39. And we actually saw a very similar rally by alt Bitcoin pairs in mid-November of 2020 as well. And so I'm sort of thinking right now that there is a chance that Bitcoin dominance has already topped because it did make it to 60%. But I do want people to be aware that we saw a very similar rally by alt Bitcoin pairs back over here in November of 2020. And then in December of 2020, we saw one final drop by altcoins on their Bitcoin pairs. So that would correspond to potentially one final surge in Bitcoin dominance. And then one last thing about it is, I do think it makes a lot of sense to look at Bitcoin dominance excluding stablecoins. And this is basically a chart that approximates that. And so these are the two paths that I would think about for Bitcoin dominance. One path is where the top is already in, and it just kind of hangs around these highs for a couple more months. By the way, excluding stablecoins, the target was around 65%, right? So it's 60% including stables, 65% excluding stables. So I think one option is it just kind of hangs out around these levels for the rest of the year and then goes down in 2025. Or you could see sort of a pop by above this wedge, and then it goes down in 2025. And I think either of those two scenarios are somewhat equally likely at this point. My base case is Bitcoin dominance stays relatively strong for until the end of the year, and then perhaps starts going down in 2025.
Ron Neuner, founder of Crypto Banter, was also on the show about 2 weeks ago, and he explains why he is stockpiling cash right now, even though what's next for him is what he says is the most bullish 4 years ever for Bitcoin.
So first of all, am I surprised about the 94,000? I thought we would be at 100,000 already. There's a lot of things happening. I mean, if we look at the Bitcoin chart, I think the Bitcoin chart tells a story. So if you give me a second here, that is my screen. You can see the Bitcoin chart. And in fact, let's actually go to the Bitcoin USD chart. I think that's where you see the best view. So if you look at the daily chart on Bitcoin, what you realize is that you're getting into some kind of parabola over here. And the parabola actually, we broke out of a 7-month downtrend on the elections, on the thought of Trump actually being elected. On the 5th of November, which is the election day, people realized that, it could have gone either way. It could have gone back into the downtrend if Kamala won and, up if Trump actually landed up winning. And that's when the market actually started to go parabolic. And then you got to ask yourself, okay, well, why? Well, if you look at the kind of noises that are happening right now, we've gone from an administration that ran on an anti-crypto army in Elizabeth Warren to one that's running on a pro-crypto army. You've gone from a head of the SEC who wouldn't meet Brian Armstrong, who's the biggest CEO of the biggest exchange in the US, to Trump wanting to meet Brian Armstrong. You've got people that have been nominated as the head of the SEC, which are all very, very, very pro-crypto. You've got a Secretary of Commerce, which has been appointed, who is very, 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 very pro-crypto. And so it feels like all the puzzle pieces have just fallen for the most bullish 4 years ahead for crypto. And this is coming out of an environment where we've gone through probably what were the 4 most abusive years for crypto people in the United States. That's the first thing.
What are you expecting once Bitcoin hits 100K?
Well, look, I think 100K is a psychological level, right? Like, I think that like 100K is a psychological level. So I think what's going to happen, and if you allow me to share my screen again, is
yes,
I think we're going to hit the 100K. But then I think it's pretty normal to have these 25 or 30% pullbacks. And, we had 6 or 7 of them in 2016 and 17. In 2020, 2021, we also had 5 or 6 of them. So it's pretty normal in the Bitcoin world to have big, sharp corrections. And how much more so when you've got an option market overlaid on a Bitcoin market, which is trading gamma. So to me, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. That is why I'm starting to accumulate cash. That's why I'm 8% in cash, targeting 30% in cash in the next 4 weeks. I suspect the correction comes just before the inauguration. So sometime between now and January, I suspect the crash comes. And I think, I'm not going to sell any of my core holdings, but I am going to reduce my leveraged holdings, and I'm going to reduce my trading holdings, and I'm going to be sitting on a pile of cash. So when that inevitable dip does come, I'm ready to capitalize on it.
You're not concerned about inflation anymore, Ron, if you're sitting on cash?
I mean, I'm sitting on cash short term because I'm expecting the market correction to happen, but in the next 4 to 8 weeks. So even in 4 to 8 weeks on a 4% or 5% annualized yield, I'm losing nothing. Like, you're talking about, like Bitcoin is up today in 1 day 3%. You're talking about small money in the big scheme of things.
You're expecting a pullback, of correction. What kind of correction are we talking about? We're talking about 2022.
20%. Okay. 20%. Like I think Bitcoin goes back to $75,000-$80,000.
Okay. And then at that point, you're going to be deploying back into Bitcoin or more into the alts?
No, more into altcoins. So my Bitcoin position is pretty okay. Mm-hmm. I take profits into Bitcoin and I trade on the altcoins. So whatever money I make on altcoins, I take the profits, I put the profits into Bitcoin. That's pretty much how I trade.
Aaron Arnold, co-host of Altcoin Daily, shares Ron Neuner's views, especially over the next 9 months. You had a video come out right after the Trump election called "Cryptos Are About to Explode." Cryptocurrencies are about to explode. And you highlighted all the reasons why, focusing on the changes that the Trump administration planned to make. What are some of these changes, and why do you think cryptos are going to explode?
Sure. Let's talk about why Bitcoin is rallying so hard. And by the way, if you're here from Altcoin Daily, smash that like button and follow David. But, just generally speaking, why is Bitcoin's price going up? They're calling it the Trump pump, which I do think is a cute way to explain it, but it's more than that. Here's the way I think about it. For the last 7+ years, the US market, or the crypto market, has been suppressed by the US markets. For the last 7+ years, the crypto market has been suppressed. And now that suppression is being lifted, these assets, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, they're in price discovery again. And the markets, now the question is, what is the fair value of these assets? If Gary Gensler had just complied with the laws for the last 7 years, Bitcoin futures were approved, I think it was November of 2017. Spot should have been approved months after that. It took us 7 years, and we went through lawsuits, enforcement actions, nightmare scenario for this industry. And, now with Trump coming into office, not only are there blue skies ahead, but there are specific things Trump wants to do. And we can talk about that if you want.
We will talk about that. I just want to flip over to my screen now just to give a sense of the scale of this move that we're talking about. So we went from 69 to currently 91. That is, if my chart will allow me to accurately show that, 31% move in a matter of days, really. We had a similar big move early in the year, like you mentioned, the Bitcoin ETF getting approved, 42%. So actually on a magnitude basis, this isn't even as high as the move we got earlier in the year, and then it just stayed range bound. Let's take a look at the prior bull cycle in a short amount of time, Bitcoin went up 37% in 2021, and then early 2021, the first bull cycle, 80% move. So Bitcoin has seen this before, this kind of move. It's not even, if you just take, my point is, if you just take a look at prior bull cycles, this isn't even the biggest move we've seen, right? So more room to climb, or is this it?
I think there's more room to climb. And obviously, if any of us knew the future, we'd all be rich. But if you look back at prior Bitcoin cycles, after Bitcoin clearly breaks above the previous cycle's all-time high, which, hey, we're there. That just happened.
Yeah.
The next 9-ish months are when you see the biggest gains, the highest rallies. And so because Bitcoin broke over all-time highs, the media is going to start talking about it again. Everybody at cookouts and parties around the world going, hey, man, you have Bitcoin, my Bitcoin's up. We're about to see that next leg, the most exciting part, and actually the last leg of the bull market, I think, which, hopefully lasts for, 9 months, 12 months, nobody knows.
Finally, $1 million Bitcoin is the long-term outlook for several prominent Bitcoin investors I've spoken to this year, including Samson Mow, CEO of Jan3, and Jack Mallers, founder of Strike. Now, $1 million is not an entirely new concept. We've heard these targets before, especially during the last bull cycle, but they're coming back. So let's take a listen to what Samson and Jack have to say.
Yeah, so I believe Bitcoin is severely undervalued right now. Even anywhere sub 100K is just a very rare anomaly. We should have been far higher than 100,000 right now, but I believe we're on track to 1 million. The ETFs have been an enormous influx of capital into Bitcoin, but that has been muted by the unwinding of GBTC or grayscale Bitcoin. So I think my prediction was earlier this year that the ETFs would send us there. I still believe that that will be the case, but it has been muted because of the unwinding of all the drama, I guess, that is largely held over from FTX until now. So we're getting to the point where we should be going parabolic very soon.
Is there a particular reason or catalyst that will send it parabolic?
Well, there's a number of reasons. Like, first of all, you can look at the macroeconomic landscape and the massive accumulation of debt in the U.S. Interest payments are getting to $1 trillion a year. And I don't think most people realize, but these are astronomical numbers and these are absolutely unsustainable. So either there's going to be a debt jubilee or the US dollar has to rebase to Bitcoin. So, one Satoshi, there's 100 million Satoshis in a Bitcoin, and you could reprice the US dollar to one Satoshi equals $1.
Why would the US dollar have to reprice to Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, there's no way to pay the debt off, right? And debt is far higher than GDP.
Yeah.
So something has to give. Either there's a debt jubilee all around, or you have to reprice or rebase to a harder asset. And it's difficult at this time to imagine the creation of a new dollar. Like you have that in many countries, when the fiat currency fails, you just make a new one and you lop off some zeros. But with the advent of Bitcoin, it's no longer possible because people they have an option now. They have a choice to go to Bitcoin or to accept a new fiat. And I just don't believe that will be the case. Therefore, it is inevitable that we do rebase to Bitcoin eventually. The question is when. But I believe $1 to one Satoshi is a fair rebase plan.
$1 million for Bitcoin. Walk us through your thesis of how it could get there.
I just don't think that enough people have a big enough imagination of this upcoming cycle I'm expecting. I mean, the bond market is in trouble for really arguably the first time in modern financial history. Bondholders are getting absolutely demolished and crushed. Now, David, who owns bonds? All of our banks. So our bank deposits aren't there because the bonds that were purchased with my deposit is underwater. And so if central banks and government is going to try and save that market, the amount of liquidity that's needed is going to send assets very high. I mean, you can try and do napkin math. And I joke, like, how many COVIDs are we going to get if they try and bail out this market that we're in today? You may get 2-3 COVID. So if that happens, it's impossible to speculate on an asset as scarce as Bitcoin. But I think 250,000 to $1 million is the imagination I have in that range of just how big this can get. And that's based on all the liquidity that's going to be required to make this market solvent.
By the way, this is what Clem Chambers had to say about the $1 million forecast. You say it's expensive. I mean, the terms cheap and expensive, I guess, are relative to what you believe is a fair value. I've talked to people who literally think that anything under $1 million is considered undervalued. I take it you're not in that camp. And so
I
you do
love
believe.
that. I love that when people say that, because that means it's the end. That is exactly the sign that I look for. When people go, it's gone to $1 million now, I go, yeah, have it off me. You can have it for 100 grand. Why don't you take that? Yeah, see you later. And the other thing I look for is when it's on the mainstream main news and it says, oh, today Bitcoin hit blah, 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 and everyone's going crazy about it. Isn't it wonderful? Oh, look, there's some people that have made a lot of money. That is also the top. And, we are in that zone right now. It's just it's not as if Bitcoin doesn't do it every 4 years like clockwork.
Yeah.
There is. I've been saying that. It's a 4-year cycle. And everyone goes, you're mad. What are you talking about? It's a halving cycle. The supply halves and the price doubles. So if you take these peaks and you divide them by 2 every 4 years, you'll see the pattern. All right. The only question there has been recently is that sideways channel that you're showing. Was that the top? Because that was 75,000. You could say the previous top was actually maybe 35 because the previous top was 18,000. And you could do all that magic. So the answer was that the top? And I was saying, just hang on in there, put your stop loss in when you lose your nerve. If it breaks out through the top of that, it will go mental. And I said that in Forbes a few weeks ago. You can go to Forbes and make sure that I haven't been predicting the past. I actually did say it before it happened. You see all my little squiggles on my little chart saying it's going to go here now and it's going to go there. It's all in the record. And now, having been a bull since the bottom, effectively, on your show and others, I'm going, oh, well, we're kind of there now.
So what do you think is going to happen? Where do you stand on this? What's your outlook? Comment below. And I hope this variety of perspectives has been helpful in keeping you informed. You can find the full interviews of all the clips I've shown here, links down below in the description. And stay tuned. I'll be doing a lot more crypto coverage and Bitcoin content in particular now that Bitcoin's hit $100,000. So I'll be getting a lot more expert outlook towards the end of the year. Thanks for watching. Have a great night. And don't forget to like and subscribe.